Brown Derby, Hollywood, 1934. The lunch rush is almost over, plates clink softly against china, cigarette smoke hangs in a low gray cloud beneath the curved ceiling. Outside, chauffeurs wait with engines idling along Wilshire Boulevard. Inside a back booth, Louis B. Mayer is not eating. His fork rests untouched beside a half-cut chop. Across from him, Louella Parsons folds her gloves carefully and places them on the table. She does it slowly, deliberately. The publicist seated at the end of the booth keeps dabbing his upper lip with a linen napkin. He hasn't touched his water. He hasn't blinked in a while. Louella leans forward. Not much, just enough. Her perfume reaches the table before her words do. She smiles. Louis, she says softly, almost kindly, I hope she's feeling better this morning. That's it. No accusation, no details, no raised voice. But the booth goes still. Mayer's jaw tightens first, then his shoulders. He knows exactly what she means, they all do. The private party last night wasn't supposed to spill past the gates. It was one of those gatherings the studios preferred to pretend never happened. A rented estate in Bel Air, too much gin, too many men with political connections, and one young starlet who didn't leave when she should have. There had been shouting. Then silence. Now Louella knows. Or at least she knows enough. And she's asking about the girl's health. The word lands heavy between them. Health in 1934 Hollywood doesn't just mean illness. It means scandal. It means doctors who make quiet house calls. It means studio fixers driving through back entrances before dawn. It means morality clauses buried in contracts that can dissolve a career overnight. Mayer clears his throat. His voice is steady when it comes, but there's something metallic beneath it. She's resting, he says. Louella nods. Of course. Another pause. She doesn't ask for details, she doesn't need them. Her power isn't in pressing, it's in implying. She lifts her coffee cup, takes a careful sip, and watches Mayer over the rim. Her eyes don't blink. The publicist tries to fill the space. It was a private gathering, he says quickly. Nothing worth mentioning, just friends. Louella sits her cup down with a soft click. I never mention what isn't worth mentioning. That's when Mayer finally understands the position he's in. Because Louella Parsons doesn't need proof. She needs access. And she has it. Her column runs in over 400 newspapers across America. Millions read her every morning before breakfast. Presidents court her, studio heads fear her, actors beg her. One paragraph from her could shift stock prices. One raised eyebrow in print could invite the district attorney to start asking questions. And the district attorney in Los Angeles in 1934 answers to pressures Mayer would rather not invite. Louella smooths the edge of the tablecloth with one finger. I would hate, she continues gently, for the wrong version of events to circulate. The wrong version. Not the truth. The wrong version. That's the thread. Because in Hollywood perception is currency, and Louella controls distribution. Mayer leans forward now, he lowers his voice. What are you hearing? It's a mistake. He shouldn't have asked that. She smiles again, smaller this time. Oh Louis, she says, I don't hear things people tell me. And they do. Drivers, secretaries, wives, discarded lovers, political aides, hotel staff, studio interns who want protection, doctors who want favors, police officers who prefer their names to stay out of columns. Information flows toward Louella the way rivers flow toward the ocean. And she decides what evaporates. The publicist shifts in his seat. There's no story here, he insists. Louella finally turns her gaze to him. There's no anger in it, just assessment. My dear, she says calmly, there is always a story. Silence again. A waiter approaches the booth, hesitates, senses something wrong, and quietly retreats. Mayer adjusts his tie. It's a subtle gesture, but it betrays him. He's calculating. If she prints even a hint about last night, the studio will have to respond. That means lawyers, doctors, perhaps a staged engagement, perhaps a sudden exhaustion retreat to Europe. And if politicians catch wind of it, it could spark calls for industry oversight. Hollywood is already under scrutiny, the production code is tightening, morality is becoming a public weapon. One wrong headline could accelerate everything. Loella checks her watch. I'm filing in 3 hours, she says. Not a threat. A fact. 3 hours. Mayer feels the clock now. He knows the system, he helped build it. Stars are investments, images are engineered, scandals are managed, but Loella sits outside the system while feeding off it. She is unofficial. Untouchable. He lowers his voice further. What would make this uninteresting, he asks. There it is. Not denial. Negotiation. Loella doesn't answer immediately. She studies the restaurant around them. Other studio heads sit at distant tables. Some glance over, pretending not to. They've noticed the tension. They know what it means when Loella Parsons leans into a booth. It means someone's life is being measured. Finally, she looks back at Mayer. Honesty, she says softly, with me. Not the public. Not the papers. With her. Because if she feels respected, included, valued, she protects. If she feels ignored or deceived, she exposes. Mayer nods slowly. He understands the transaction. He always has. But today the balance feels different. Because this time, it isn't just a drunken indiscretion. It's something darker. The girl from last night isn't just another contract player, she's fragile, young, and connected to a senator's donor circle. If her name slips into print beside even a whisper of impropriety, it won't just be a studio problem. It will be a political problem. Loella can see the realization forming in Mayer's eyes. She stands. Smooth, unhurried. She puts her gloves back on. Call me within the hour, she says, before I decide how concerned I should be. And then she walks out. No raised voice. No dramatic exit. Just the soft click of heels on tile. The booth remains frozen. Mayer doesn't move for several seconds. Then he turns to the publicist. Find out exactly who talked, he says quietly. But they both know it doesn't matter. Because it isn't about who talked. It's about what Loella now owns. Outside, her driver opens the car door. She slides inside, closes it, and sits in silence as the engine pulls away from the curb. She isn't angry. She isn't excited. She's thinking. About leverage. About loyalty. About how much fear is enough. Back inside the brown Derby, Mayer finally exhales. And for the first time that afternoon, he realizes something unsettling. Loella didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for favors. She didn't even ask for the truth. She asked for control. And in 3 hours, she will decide whether a young actress keeps her career or disappears. The clock is already ticking. The clock on Loella Parsons' dashboard reads 1:17 p.m. 3 hours. Her driver keeps his eyes forward. He's learned not to ask questions, not about who she meets, not about who she spares. Hollywood passes by outside the window, sunlit, polished, confident. But beneath the palm trees and studio gates, panic is already moving. Inside MGM's executive offices, Louis B. Mayer shuts the door harder than he intends to. The publicist stands waiting. Who was at that party? Mayer asks. The list is short, too short. A junior congressman from Illinois, a film distributor with political ambitions, 2 rising contract actresses, and the girl. The girl whose name cannot surface beside the word health. The Production Code Administration has been tightening its grip since mid-1934. Joseph Breen is watching the studios carefully now. Morality is no longer a suggestion, it is enforcement. Studios are already bending under religious and political pressure. If Loella prints even a hint of impropriety involving a vulnerable young actress and a politically connected gathering, Breen will notice. And if Breen notices, Washington notices. Mayer lights a cigarette he doesn't inhale. Call Dr. Stein, he says. The publicist hesitates, he was there. I know, Mayer replies. That's the problem. In Hollywood, doctors don't just treat illness, they erase evidence. They write medical notes that calm rumors, they certify exhaustion and nervous strain with a signature. But last night, Dr. Stein had been drinking. And someone saw him leave early. Rumors aren't born from facts, they're born from witnesses. Across town at her Spanish-style home, Loella has already taken her hat off. She sits at a small writing desk near a tall window. Sunlight hits the paper in front of her. Blank. She taps her pen once against the wood. Her assistant stands quietly by the doorway with a notepad. Any calls? Loella asks. 2 studio secretaries, one from RKO, one from Warner. And MGM. Not yet. Loella nods. Good. Let them sweat first. Her power has always been subtle. She doesn't need to destroy careers to maintain authority. In fact, destruction is inefficient. It closes doors, it breeds resentment. Control is better. And control comes from selective mercy. She begins drafting a paragraph, not about the party, not yet. Instead, she writes about a young leading lady rumored to be overworking herself. She notes the pressures of fame, the fragility of health, the importance of good guidance. It's vague. Careful. But the tone is unmistakable. It signals that she knows something. Back at MGM, Mayer receives word that the girl has been moved to a private residence in Santa Monica. Not a hospital, not yet. Has she spoken to anyone? Mayer asks. No press, the publicist says quickly, just her sister. Sisters talk. Friends talk. Servants talk. And Loella listens. At 2:03 p.m., the phone rings at Loella's desk. She doesn't pick it up immediately. She lets it ring twice. 3 times. Then she lifts the receiver. Yes. Mayer's voice is steady but thinner now. Loella, I thought perhaps we could clarify a few things. She smiles faintly. I do prefer clarity. He explains that the party was small, respectable. The young actress simply felt faint from heat and champagne, nothing more. She's resting under medical supervision, out of an abundance of caution. Loella says nothing for several seconds. Silence on a phone line is different than silence in a room. It's sharper, more exposed. Finally she asks, and the congressman? Mayer pauses. He left early. Alone. Another pause. Yes. She knows that isn't entirely true. But she doesn't challenge it. Not directly. You understand, she says calmly, that my readers care about the well-being of these young women. They trust me. I know. And when they trust me, she continues, they trust the studios. There it is. The exchange. Trust for access. Protection for cooperation. If Mayer keeps her informed, keeps her respected, she frames the narrative gently. She shields, she softens language. If he shuts her out, she sharpens. You'll have my word, Mayer says. Loella almost laughs. Word is cheap in Hollywood. But fear is reliable. She sets the receiver down and looks at the paragraph she drafted earlier. She crosses out one sentence. Then another. Instead of hinting at scandal, she pivots. She writes, our brightest stars often forget they are human before they are luminous. One promising actress is wisely taking time to rest after an evening of celebration left her fatigued. Youth, after all, deserves protection. Protection. It's a gift. But it's also a reminder. She could have written something else. She could have described laughter too loud, a door closed too long, a car leaving after midnight. She doesn't. Not today. At MGM, the afternoon drags. Executives pace. Telephones buzz. But by 4:30 p.m., word filters in from a friendly editor. Loella's column is calm, harmless, protective. Mayer exhales slowly. The girl's name isn't mentioned. The congressman is invisible. The studio survives another day. But something has shifted. Because now Mayer understands something more clearly than ever. Loella didn't just spare them. She demonstrated that she could destroy them. And she did it without raising her voice. Weeks pass. The young actress returns quietly to set. A new publicity campaign frames her as delicate, devoted to charity work, grateful for concerned friends. The public forgets. But Mayer doesn't. He makes sure Loella receives advance casting announcements, exclusive interviews, holiday gifts. Access. Always access. Because that lunch at the Brown Derby wasn't about a party. It was about a hierarchy. Studios create stars. But Loella shapes perception. And perception controls everything. Yet there's something else beneath the surface. Something Loella herself begins to sense. Each time she protects a studio, she strengthens her influence. But she also becomes responsible for what she hides, for what never reaches print, for the young women whose health becomes a coded word. One afternoon, months later, she receives a handwritten note from the actress's sister. Just 3 lines. "Thank you for your kindness," she is trying to forget. Loella reads it twice. Then she places it in a drawer and closes it. Because kindness is what happened at that lunch. Power did. And power, once exercised quietly, rarely returns to silence. By late 1934, every major studio head understands the rule. Never surprise Loella Parsons. Never let her feel excluded. Never make her learn something from someone else. Because when Loella smiles and asks about someone, health, it isn't concern. It's inventory. And somewhere in Los Angeles, another party is already being planned. Another young actress is already being invited. And Loella's phone line remains open. Waiting. By the winter of 1935, no one in Hollywood pretends anymore. Not about Loella. They still greet her warmly, still stand when she approaches a table, still send flowers on her birthday, but the warmth is strategic now, measured. Because everyone remembers the lunch. They remember the way she didn't threaten. They remember the way Mayer asked what would make the story uninteresting. And they remember that she decided. That is what changed. Before that afternoon at the Brown Derby, Loella Parsons was powerful. After it, she became structural. Studios began adjusting schedules around her column deadlines. Publicists drafted statements with her phrasing in mind. Invitations to private gatherings were quietly cleared with her office first, not because she demanded it, but because no one wanted her learning about them secondhand. She never wrote about that Bel Air party. Not directly. But something subtle shifted in her tone after that day. Her columns grew softer toward certain men, sharper toward others. Careers rose gently under her approval. Others faded without dramatic scandal, just a series of cool mentions, fewer paragraphs, shorter quotes. In Hollywood, being ignored can be worse than being attacked. The young actress from that night continued working for another 3 years, smaller roles, carefully chosen scripts. The studio repositioned her as wholesome, distant, grateful, no more unsupervised parties, no more political donors on guest lists. Then one day, she simply stopped appearing on call sheets. No scandal, no public explanation. Her contract expired quietly. Loella never mentioned her again. And that silence felt heavier than any accusation. Because by then, everyone understood what Loella's protection cost. It wasn't money. It wasn't gifts. It was alignment. If she protected you, you owed her proximity, you owed her access, you owed her truth before anyone else received it. The illusion of control remained with the studio heads, but the flow of information belonged to her. There's a story told quietly among old MGM staffers, never printed, never confirmed. Months after the Brown Derby lunch, Mayer allegedly told a new executive, "We don't manage scandals, Loella manages whether they exist." He didn't say it angrily. He said it like a fact. And that was the most unsettling part. Because Hollywood was supposed to be run by contracts, lawyers, and moguls, by men who built empires from nothing. Yet a columnist without a studio, without a production slate, could freeze a room with one question about health. Not because she shouted, but because she knew. The production code tightened further in the years that followed. Morality became marketing. Studios doubled down on image control. Doctors made more quiet visits. Publicists became more vigilant. And Loella's column remained steady. Reassuring. Protective. Strategic. She didn't expose everything. That was never the point. Total exposure would have collapsed the system she depended on. Instead, she curated fear. Just enough. If an actor displeased her, she might describe him as tired or difficult. If a starlet seemed uncooperative, she might question whether fame suited her temperament. Those phrases, mild on paper, translated into phone calls behind closed doors. Directors reconsidered casting. Studios reconsidered renewals. Careers adjusted course. All without Loella ever raising her voice. The most powerful moment of that lunch wasn't what she said. It was what Mayer said. What would make this uninteresting? That sentence echoed quietly through the industry. Because it revealed something no one wanted to admit. The studios weren't afraid of the truth. They were afraid of narrative. And Loella owned it. Years later, when Hedda Hopper rose as her rival, Hollywood would witness open gossip wars, sharp headlines, competitive scoops, visible tension. But Loella's influence was born differently. It came from private conversations, from lunches, from pauses, from letting powerful men imagine the worst version of what she might write. That's the detail most histories skip. They describe her circulation numbers, her friendships, her loyalty to certain executives. But they rarely linger on that booth at the Brown Derby. On the way she asked about a young woman's health. On the way Mayer adjusted his tie. On the way a studio built on illusion recognized that illusion had a gatekeeper. In private, Loella kept scrapbooks, columns clipped and organized, headlines preserved, letters saved. But the most important stories were the ones she never clipped. The ones that lived only in memory. There is no surviving transcript of that lunch. No recording. No official record. Just recollections. Yet its impact can be traced in behavior. In how studios treated her afterward. In how invitations shifted. In how no major scandal broke without her fingerprints somewhere nearby, either on the page or deliberately absent from it. The unsettling truth is simple. She didn't need to destroy reputations to prove she could. She only needed to show it once. And she did it with a smile. The actress from that party eventually married outside the industry, moved east, lived quietly, no memoir, no interviews. The congressman continued his career. The doctor kept practicing. And Loella kept writing. But if you look closely at her columns from that year, you'll notice something subtle. The word health appears more often. Always gentle. Always concerned. Never specific. A coded reminder. In Hollywood, in 1934, a single question about someone's well-being could carry more danger than a headline in bold print. Because it meant someone knew. And once someone knew, silence became leverage. That's the part that lingers. Not the party. Not the rumors. Not even the potential scandal. But the quiet recalibration of power in a restaurant booth, under cigarette smoke, in the middle of a sunny Los Angeles afternoon. A moment when a studio head realized that the most dangerous person in Hollywood didn't hold a contract. She held restraint. And restraint, when paired with information, is heavier than exposure. Loella Parsons died in 1972. By then, Hollywood had changed, television had arrived, the old studio system had cracked. But the blueprint remained. Modern publicity machines still operate on the same principle she perfected that afternoon. Control the narrative before someone else does. Offer access in exchange for protection. Smile. Ask a gentle question. And let powerful people imagine the paragraph you chose not to write. Because sometimes the most terrifying words in Hollywood aren't printed. They're implied. And once spoken softly across a table, they never fully disappear. The Brown Derby is gone now. The booth is gone. The smoke has cleared. But somewhere in every carefully managed scandal, there is an echo of that lunch. A reminder that fear doesn't always shout. Sometimes it smiles. And waits. Silently.